In this video, I dive into everything about the myelin sheath. Myelin is a white-colored sheath made of mostly fat and cholesterol that wraps around a nerve cell. Myelin's main function is to insulate the neuron, protect the axon, and direct the nerve's impulse where it's supposed to go. In a healthy person, nerve cells send impulses to each other along the thin fiber that's attached to the nerve cell body. These thin projections are called axons, and most of them are protected by the myelin sheath, which allows nerve impulses to travel rapidly and effectively. Myelin is vital to a healthy nervous system, affecting everything from movement to cognition. What does myelin do? The condition of your myelin impacts your motor control and coordination, cognitive ability, memory, intelligence, problem solving, IQ, reading ability, brain development, reaction time, learning, sensory perception, attention, perception of reality, and mood. Dysfunction. Myelin decreases with age. Biology professors use the insulated wire analogy to help students understand what myelin does. A naked wire will zap anything close to it, but an insulated wire will keep the electricity moving in the direction it's supposed to. Take this a step further. The circuitry of our brain is arranged more like a bundle of wires that all connect to different things. The quality of the wire's insulation, in brain speak, an axon's myelin covering is especially crucial when all of the wires are packed in close. Imagine you flip a switch to turn on a lamp and instead you fire up the hairdryer. Wiring like that leaves you with a lot to sort through. Heavily myelinated neural pathways function up to 300 times faster than cells that have experienced neurodegeneration. This helps us move more quickly and make smarter decisions. These optimized neural pathways also help us become more emotionally agile, boosting your resiliency against life's greatest challenges. It is clear that myelin is important for living a healthy and fulfilled life. But in some cases, such as an immune system disorder like multiple sclerosis or other demyelinating diseases, demyelination is unavoidable. When myelin wears down, the neuron signal hops onto an axon it wasn't meant to activate. That opens you up to a whole host of potential problems with memory, movement, coordination, and more. And you see exactly those types of issues in neurodiversity, like ADHD, autism, language disorder, stuttering, depression, bipolar disorder, dyslexia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, cognitive decline, Alzheimer's disease, Tourette syndrome, schizophrenia, and so on. Coordination issues. Difficulty with spatial awareness, depending on the person. Some have difficulty with reading or calculation, sensory sensitivity and attention deficit, all of those things. So possibly there is something going on with myelination as well.
And myelin, although it's not made in the gut, requires nutrients from the gut in order to be made. So B12 allows us to know who we are, it allows us to sleep well, it allows us to have good brain function. Myelin protects the nerves and helps you feel safe and resilient. And the new vagus nerve, the parasympathetic aspect of the vagus nerve, is highly myelinated. So at a physiological level, if you don't have a lot of myelin because you haven't been able to make it for like 10 years or more, or you haven't since you're a baby, it's very hard to have a good physiological capacity to be resilient. So what I see is the more we get the body into a good place, all of this stuff starts sorting itself out quite naturally. And so it makes sense when you look at the vagus nerve that it's always on. And it's not hijacking this stuff, it's just using it in a certain way. Oxytocin we give to people in pill form because it helps calm them down, but it's actually something we make in the body when our body's in a good enough place. And it allows social behavior bonding and relaxation. The kidneys produce vitamin D, which allows for mood, immunity, digestion of proteins, allows for cellular activity. The kidneys are the adrenals. If your kidneys are on 24/7, you don't have the downtime to make your vitamin D. And so many people on the spectrum are low in vitamin D. It's very, very common. But this makes sense of why. Because the body is never at a point of rest even when people were sleeping. And if you've got people on the spectrum or you are on the spectrum, you'll probably know that this is true. People don't wake up looking refreshed, and they're very alert all of the time. They can't get their brain to shut down. That's because the brain is constantly sending danger signals up to the brain to keep everything on, and so you're in this loop. Gallbladder and colon is influenced. Gallbladder does cholesterol and fats, so it to me makes sense of why people have issues around that. It's also, you don't have as much feeling if you're in an immobilized state and that line gets too close, so you often don't know when you're full, or you don't know when you have pain. So a lot of weight issues can be explained by this inability to have interoceptive capacity. Colon and bladder makes, a lot of sense to a lot of people. People have a lot of time trying to control this. And again, we do a lot of intellectual stuff around this. But what I find a lot of the time is when people get their body into a better place, this stuff kicks in. And they have this awareness, this interoceptive capacity that you can't take someone to intellectually. But it just is natural and naturally comes online when we are appropriately kind to the body. The gut does B12, serotonin, dopamine. It's 80 to 90% of the immune system's in the gut. When you look at serotonin, which is produced in the gut primarily, it allows for deep, peaceful states. It regulates intestinal movements and appetite and all of these things beautifully. If you don't have it, you have issues with mood, anxiety, and psychosis. And so we give people serotonin. But we make it in our body if our body's in a good enough place. And then our body knows how much we need. And it's cyclical. So when you have deep, peaceful states and you can heal and you can be in a good place, you keep doing it because you're sort of getting a nice spiral to a place of wellness. Dopamine allows for all of this stuff: excitement, reinforcement and reward, executive functioning, cognitive flexibility, motor control, motivation, etc. There's all this stuff, eyes. It's synthesized in the brain and the kidneys. So again, if we're really, really busy, it doesn't get to happen. So we're starting to understand just how much our emotional and physical capacity has to do with the state of our body. And we can put as much good food in and as much vitamins as we want, and that can sometimes be really useful. It doesn't always help. And I think because the nervous system's just running full tilt all of the time, and unless you educate it to sit somewhere differently, you often don't get a whole lot of change.
oligodendrocytes split into cells that produce myelin only until you're in your late 50s. Even without the age factor, oligodendrocytes are the most vulnerable nervous system cells you have. Demyelination is the term used to describe the destruction of the myelin sheath, the protective covering surrounding nerve fibers. This damage causes nerve signals to slow down or stop, resulting in neurological impairment. Depending on where in the central nervous system myelin is attacked, symptoms like sensory disturbances, vision problems, muscle spasms, and bladder problems begin to manifest. This is why the symptoms of MS vary widely from one person to another, as the location of myelin attacks varies within the central nervous system.
And we don't really, again, have a really good reason for why. And then what we do is we individually deal with all of these issues and manage them at best and sort of go, again, well, that's just autism. But there's no sort of foundational way of understanding all of this and then directing our therapies, in a sense, to something that may be more cohesive. As people get older, there's all sorts of other things that go on at a body level, because even depression and anxiety, when you look at it, are just quite different now, we're finding, from what we used to say is a brain disorder with depression and etc. We're finding that it's just a massive, consistent overload for the system, and people get overwhelmed and just stay there and go into shutdown. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. But again, there's all these physical aspects to living in an autistic body or having an autistic mind that we don't really fully understand, because we've labeled it a brain pathology. So there's this huge gap between what's going on in the body and then the intellectual work that we're asking people to do. And I've found that it's very well met by this theory. The theory is by a chap called Stephen Porges. He's an American neurobiologist, and he's brilliant. He's loved worldwide for this theory that's probably about 25 odd years old now. And it's a way of talking about how the brain and body interact and what happens when the brain and the body stop talking to each other. And so this theory is applied to trauma, to bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, depression, anxiety, a whole range of things. And there was a very small portion in this very challenging book about autism, and it just thrilled me. So I wrote the Dr. Zeus version of it, and Steve Porges was very kind and wrote the foreword to my book. And he has also since had a look at my work, and he's been really complimentary about that, which has been really nice. But it's a really well-loved book, because it is, when people read it, they just go, well, that makes so much sense, you know. And it's that this isn't actually wildly fantastical. When I go through it, you'll really see what I mean.
Now that you have those straight, you can get a better idea of what goes wrong if we don't keep your myelin strong. Giving myelin the right environment and nourishment helps you stay headstrong throughout every stage of life. Remyelination. How to increase myelin for longevity. As more studies reveal the role of myelinating cells in a healthy brain and body, more people are asking how to increase myelin to boost their longevity. So what exactly is myelin and the myelin sheath? And what do these things mean for living your best life? Here we outline everything you need to know about myelin loss and myelin repair. including how to create new myelin for a sharper, healthier and longer life. Ways to improve your myelin. You don't need major motor problems to start paying attention to your myelin. Simple forgetfulness and brain fog signal that your myelin is struggling. Here's what you can do for routine myelin maintenance. Support your mitochondria. Frequent Bulletproof radio guest Dr. Terry Walls reversed her MS by focusing on supporting her mitochondria. Mitochondria abnormalities tank your metabolism, which steals your cell's energy and causes a cascade that leads to lower myelin production and shoddy repair. Mitochondria gets first dibs on brain energy. In fact, if energy drops low enough, the brain will break down myelin in order to liberate the energy potential in the fat-rich myelin sheath. If the right energy supply is available, your brain won't attack itself to get what it needs to carry out processes. To keep the brain well fed. Feed your brain ketones. Ketogenic diet. A ketogenic diet is a very low-carb diet, less than 50 grams of carbs per day. When you restrict carbohydrate-rich foods, such as grains, sugar, and even potatoes, legumes, and fruit, your body enters ketosis, a metabolic state in which your body and brain run on fatty acids and ketones instead of glucose. Ketones are brain energy. In the case of age-related mitochondrial dysfunction, the brain looks for ketones to meet energy demands. It craves ketones so badly that it will break down myelin in order to get to the fats. It needs to generate ketones, and then it will use those ketones to make ATP for energy. Myelin benefits from the availability of ketones as well. High-fat diets improve myelination, and when both ketones and glucose are available, the brain chooses ketones to synthesize myelin. The best way to reduce inflammation is by following an anti-inflammatory diet. You should strive to eliminate all gluten, refined carbohydrates, particularly flour, and processed food from your diet.
We know from all sorts of things that we have done with people on the spectrum that physical stuff works. It calms people, it soothes people. We know that foods and taking care of diet and being sensitive to that helps, but we never really have an explanation of why. It's just, oh, that's autism. So we're sort of always playing with this very nebulous thing called autism that we don't know, we can't define. There's no part of the brain that's got autism. It's this very elusive kind of thing. Sorry for that's terrible language. And so all we've been able to do is say what it isn't, in a sense. But we know that physical therapies are useful. So the polyvagal theory is the body has a learnt response to pain and fear and can go into an involuntary shutdown as a safety mechanism. So within that safety mechanism, we have a sliding scale of safety options. And all mammals have these safety options. So in this sense, we're no different from the lions and the tigers and the bears. We all have a physical system that allows us to engage in being in the world. So our social engagement system is our newest evolutionary function. And as I said, all mammals have this system. We just then employ it with a, fairly upgraded brain in terms of executive functioning, etc. In order to be able to use your social engagement system, which is your connection to your eyes, ears, face, voice, and heart, You have to be in a good enough physiological place. You have to be kind of calm enough. Your tummy has to be regulated. Your heart rate needs to be down. There's all sorts of ways in which your neurosensory systems have to be nice and even, and you're in a parasympathetic enough state, and then you have a really good connection, like software, to your social capacity. When you go into a flight or fight state, so maybe there's a lion way off in the distance, your body responds. It notifies you that there's something going on, and then your brain kicks in and goes, well, I know what that is, and then you are aware enough, on the whole, for making some decisions to flight, fight, or freeze, kind of stop still. And here we're in kind of a sympathetic state, and most of us go through our whole day like this and week and, forget to ever be in a really calm place. Excuse me. So we go into this fight-flight thing, and it's mostly voluntary, and we can kind of stay there. There's also another option, and this is what Porges is saying with his theory, which is brilliant, and it's actually nothing new, we've just forgotten, that the body has a capacity to immobilize. So at this point, the body takes over. If it deems that lion is getting too close for you to make any responsible decision on what's going to make you safe, it will drop you out like a rabbit in a headlights. It will take you out, and you cannot use your voice, your face, move your body, etc. at a certain point, and you literally just have to wait until it wakes up again. Because if that lion gets really close and you blink or you murmur or you move your head or leg or twitch, you're interesting to the lion, and then it suddenly becomes a different state of play. Whereas your best opportunity is if the lion's not particularly hungry, it will go away. And so it's your body's last strategy for survival, and often it works. We're not supposed to really employ it very often, and in this day and age we don't deal with lions, so we don't really even think this happens. But the theory with the polyvagal theory and with autism is that the physical system is a lot more trigger happy, and people sort of more hang out in the flight or fight free state or in the immobilized state, but they're generally sort of milling around that area, and they don't have a really good understanding of what it is to be in a body that's really nicely connected and calm with an open tummy, etc. And so they're at the mercy of this physical system, and that's what people say. They say, I'm in a body that doesn't work for me. I can't control myself. I hate getting really angry. I hate not knowing what I said, but they can't control it because they've gone into a disassociated state, and that's what this is. So what we're doing with my work is teaching the body to be more robust, to have another gear on the bike, which is what one client explained it as, so that there's more choice, and the choice isn't particularly intellectual. If the body can learn how to do this, it just doesn't immobilize as much because it's got another option and it's got a level of robustness